In the shadows of Europe's grandest palaces, and amidst the whispers of power behind gilded doors, a group of extraordinary women changed the course of history. Not with swords or scepters, but with intellect, resilience, and a quiet yet undeniable force of will. They were queens, empresses, visionaries, and revolutionaries, bound by blood and destiny to the House of Coburg. While history often remembers the kings and conquerors, these women carved legacies just as impactful, though too often overlooked. Their stories are not only tales of opulence and diplomacy, but of courage, sacrifice, and unyielding influence that still echoes through the world today. Welcome to Words of Time, where history's hidden voices are brought to life. In this video, we will delve into the lasting impact of the Coburg Heiresses, uncovering how they shaped the worlds of art, culture, politics, and society, and why their contributions continue to resonate into the 21st century. Get ready to see history from a fresh, powerful perspective. The Coburg family, a dynasty rooted in the small German duchy of Saxe-Coburg, rose from relative obscurity to a position of unmatched influence and prestige across the European continent. Over the course of several centuries, members of this powerful lineage not only assumed thrones, but also helped shape the destiny of nations through their strategic marriages, diplomatic maneuvers, and cultural patronage. While monarchies have long captured the imagination of the public with their pageantry and political maneuvering, few families have interwoven themselves so deeply into the fabric of Europe's royal tapestry as the Coburgs. Their legacy is not merely one of inherited titles or regal ceremony, but of active and deliberate influence in the political, cultural, and social development of modern Europe. Originating from the Duchy of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, a small principality in what is now central Germany, the Coburgs exemplified the extraordinary potential of dynastic politics in an age where marital alliances were often as powerful as armies. Though initially modest in territorial holdings and political clout, the family swiftly elevated its position through calculated unions that placed their descendants on the thrones of Great Britain, Belgium, Portugal, Bulgaria, and beyond. The marriage of Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha to Queen Victoria of Britain in 1840 stands as a defining moment in this ascent. That union did not simply bind two individuals. It created a bridge between nations and a dynastic entanglement whose effects would reverberate across generations. The Coburg lineage, thereafter absorbed into the British royal house, would come to dominate the political landscape of Victorian Britain and eventually much of Europe. The success of the Coburg family in embedding itself into the highest echelons of European royalty was neither accidental nor entirely reliant on chance. The political instability of Europe during the 18th and 19th centuries created an environment in which dynastic marriage became a powerful tool for forging alliances and ensuring national interests. The Coburgs mastered this art with remarkable deftness. One of the earliest and most significant moves was the elevation of Franz Friedrich Anton, Duke of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, whose children and grandchildren were strategically married into ruling families throughout Europe. From this foundation, the family's reach expanded dramatically. Prince Leopold of Saxe-Coburg was elected King of the Belgians in 1831, establishing a new royal house that persists to this day. Similarly, the Coburgs established roots in Portugal with the marriage of Ferdinand of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha to Queen Maria II, creating a new line of Portuguese monarchs. In Bulgaria, another branch of the family would rise with Ferdinand I's assumption of the Bulgarian throne in the late 19th century. These royal connections were more than symbolic. They represented real political power. As members of these various monarchies, the Coburgs influenced state policy, diplomatic relations, and even military engagements. Their shared ancestry created informal networks across courts, enabling a degree of cooperation and mutual understanding that was rare in a time often characterized by nationalist fervor and political upheaval. The familial nature of these ties helped to stabilize relations between countries in times of tension, though they were also a source of complication when national loyalties came into conflict, as they did during World War I. By then, the tangled web of Coburg relations had made the British, German, and Russian royal families close relatives, yet the demands of national allegiance would override dynastic bonds. Despite the common association of monarchy with male rulers, the Coburg legacy is particularly noteworthy for the prominent and influential women who emerged from its lineage. While male members of the family often held official titles and ruled from thrones, it was frequently the women who wielded subtler, though no less consequential, forms of power. These women navigated court politics, influenced policy through their consorts, and sometimes served as sovereigns in their own right. They were often well-educated, multilingual, and steeped in diplomatic practice from a young age. Their influence extended beyond ceremonial roles, as many were active patrons of the arts, reformers, and advocates for modernizing the institutions they were part of. Queen Victoria, perhaps the most iconic figure associated with the Coburg family, exemplifies the formidable role that Coburg women played in shaping history. Though born to a minor branch of the House of Hanover, her marriage to Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha firmly integrated the Coburgs into the British monarchy. Victoria was not simply a passive participant in this dynastic alliance. Her reign marked an era of unprecedented industrial, cultural, and colonial expansion for Britain. Her decisions, both public and private, had profound implications not only for British society, but for the entire world. Her progeny, often referred to as the royal grandchildren of Europe, would go on to occupy thrones and positions of influence throughout the continent. Victoria's deep personal involvement in their marriages and placements effectively extended Coburg influence into nearly every major royal house in Europe by the end of the 19th century. Another compelling figure is Princess Victoria, the eldest daughter of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, who became the Empress of Germany through her marriage to Frederick III. Known for her intellect and liberal views, she attempted to influence the highly conservative German court and promote constitutional governance. Although her efforts were largely thwarted by entrenched political forces and the brevity of her husband's reign, her legacy persisted through her son, Wilhelm II, the last German emperor. Her personal correspondence reveals a deep concern for liberal values, education, and public health, areas she sought to reform even within the constraints of an autocratic system. Her life underscores the often unacknowledged burden borne by royal women, the expectation to be both symbols of national unity and agents of dynastic ambition, all while navigating courts that were frequently hostile to change. Elsewhere, the Coburg women continued to influence the fabric of European royalty in quiet yet profound ways. Princess Charlotte of Belgium, daughter of Leopold I, became Empress of Mexico alongside her husband Maximilian I. Though their reign was ultimately short-lived and tragic, Charlotte's dedication to her role and her political engagement during their tumultuous rule reflected the depth of Coburg ambition and the resilience of its female members. Her mental breakdown following Maximilian's execution was seen by some as a symbol of the personal cost of political grandeur and dynastic duty. Similarly, Princess Marie of Edinburgh, another Coburg descendant, became Queen of Romania and proved to be one of the most respected and effective royal consorts of her era. Her diplomatic skill during World War I and the Paris Peace Conference helped secure favorable borders for Romania and established her as a national heroine. Her writings and public engagements helped modernize the monarchy's image in Romania and earned her lasting admiration. The Coburg family's influence was not limited to political alliances and royal appointments. Their patronage of the arts, support for scientific inquiry, and involvement in philanthropic efforts contributed to the broader cultural and intellectual development of Europe. Prince Albert, for instance, was a strong advocate for technological progress and education. His support for the Great Exhibition of 1851 in London not only showcased industrial innovation, but also fostered a spirit of international cooperation and progress. This emphasis on culture and knowledge was a hallmark of the Coburg approach to leadership. Even when not directly in power, members of the family often served as cultural intermediaries, bringing together ideas and innovations from different parts of the continent. The architectural legacy of the Coburgs can still be seen across Europe in the palaces, estates, and institutions they built or supported. These physical spaces were more than just symbols of royal power. They were centers of intellectual activity, diplomatic interaction, and social reform. Many Coburg homes were renowned for their libraries, art collections, and gardens, which were often open to scholars and artists. In this way, the family helped preserve and disseminate cultural heritage at a time when much of Europe was undergoing rapid industrial and social change. Over time, the name Coburg itself would undergo transformation. During World War I, anti-German sentiment in Britain prompted King George V to change the family name from the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha to the House of Windsor, a symbolic act meant to emphasize British identity over German heritage. Though the name changed, the lineage remained intact, and the values, connections, and legacy of the Coburgs continued to shape the monarchy and its role in modern society. This shift was emblematic of the evolving nature of monarchy itself. Once reliant on dynastic marriages and hereditary power, it increasingly came to depend on public support, national symbolism, and constitutional frameworks. Despite the decline of absolute monarchy across Europe in the 20th century, the influence of the Coburg family did not vanish. Their descendants continue to occupy ceremonial and political roles in countries like Belgium and the United Kingdom. The legacy of their marriages, their governance, and their cultural contributions still resonates in contemporary debates about the role of monarchy, the nature of national identity, and the responsibilities of inherited privilege. The values espoused by some of the family's most notable members, duty, reform, cultural enrichment, remain relevant in discussions of modern constitutional monarchy. The story of the Coburgs is, in many ways, the story of Europe itself, a narrative of ambition, unity, conflict, and transformation. Through war and peace, through personal triumph and tragedy, the Coburg family consistently adapted to the changing tides of history. Their ability to remain influential across borders and generations was not merely the product of birthright, but of strategic foresight, personal resilience, and an enduring commitment to the institutions they served. They were not passive beneficiaries of history, but active participants in shaping it. This legacy, while often celebrated for its grandeur and reach, also demands a nuanced understanding of power and its consequences. The Coburgs, like many dynasties, were capable of great good and profound error. Their story invites reflection on the intersection of personal agency and historical forces, on the role of women in shaping public life, and on the enduring appeal of monarchy in an age that has increasingly moved toward republican ideals. Yet even in an era that questions the relevance of inherited power, the legacy of the Coburgs remains deeply embedded in the cultural and political DNA of Europe. Their lineage, built not only through blood but through belief in continuity and service, continues to echo in the corridors of power and in the imagination of those who look to the past to understand the present. In the grand halls of Europe's royal history, the glittering crowns and ceremonious parades often overshadow the deeper narratives that lie behind the throne, those of the women who wore the titles but also bore the burden of expectation, power, and purpose. Within the illustrious lineage of the House of Coburg, a family whose influence stretched across the monarchies of Europe, a number of remarkable women emerged who challenged, transcended, and reshaped the roles they were born into. Empress Maria Feodorovna of Russia, Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom, Queen Louise of Sweden and Norway, and many others from the Coburg bloodline were more than symbols of dynastic marriages. They were thinkers, diplomats, artists, cultural patrons, and shrewd political actors who subtly, and at times boldly, altered the course of their nations and the world around them. Their legacies have often been minimized beneath the shadow of the kings and emperors beside them, yet these heiresses of Coburg embodied a depth of agency that modern history has only begun to fully recognize. Empress Maria Feodorovna, born Dagmar of Denmark, though not originally of Coburg descent, married into the extended family network of the Coburgs through her union with the Romanovs, thus intertwining her fate with the dynastic politics that characterized the Coburg influence. As the wife of Tsar Alexander III and the mother of Nicholas II, Maria Feodorovna wielded enormous soft power at the Russian court. Renowned for her beauty, grace, and diplomatic poise, she mastered the role of empress consort with elegance and authority. Her influence extended beyond court life into social policy, charity, and imperial image-making. During her husband's reign, she was known to temper his autocratic tendencies, pushing for moderation in domestic affairs and nurturing a more compassionate image of the monarchy. Later, as the Russian Empire began to crumble under the weight of war and revolution, she stood as a pillar of strength, refusing to abandon her family or relinquish hope in monarchy. Her escape from the Bolsheviks and exile to Denmark became a powerful narrative of resilience and enduring loyalty. Maria Feodorovna was more than a consort. She was a force of continuity in an age of collapse. Queen Victoria, perhaps the most globally recognized Coburg heiress, encapsulated the multifaceted nature of royal womanhood in a modernizing world. Born to the House of Hanover, she married her first cousin, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, and through this union firmly enshrined the Coburg legacy within the British monarchy. Victoria's reign of over 60 years defined not only an era, but a worldview. Her public persona, deeply interwoven with notions of duty, domestic virtue, and imperial responsibility, created a new model for monarchy in the age of constitutional governance. Yet beneath the ceremonial facade lay a woman of intense personal conviction and political awareness. Through her extensive correspondence, journals, and direct involvement in family marriages, Victoria effectively played a central role in European diplomacy. She orchestrated marriages for her children that linked Britain to the royal houses of Germany, Russia, Denmark, and beyond, thus creating a pan-European web of alliances which, while unable to prevent war in the 20th century, once underpinned a fragile peace. Beyond her dynastic maneuvering, Victoria's cultural influence was profound. She helped shape the moral tenor of her age, promoted public health initiatives, and supported numerous charitable institutions. Her patronage extended to the arts, education, and industry, creating a vision of monarchy aligned with progress and social improvement. Though she clung to traditional gender roles in her writings, especially regarding women in politics, her own life defied those very boundaries. As a sovereign queen, mother, widow, and grandmother of Europe, Victoria was both a symbol of domestic femininity and an embodiment of imperial power. Her contradictions reveal the complexity of her role and underscore how Coburg women often navigated their identities between public duty and private conviction. Queen Louise of Sweden and Norway, another remarkable figure from this tapestry, brought her own brand of intelligence and resolve to the Scandinavian courts. Born Princess Louise of the Netherlands, she became Queen of Sweden and Norway through her marriage to King Charles XV. Though their marriage was not marked by deep affection, Louise transformed her position into one of cultural significance and national importance. As queen, she focused her energies on public welfare, particularly the advancement of women's education and healthcare. In a society undergoing modernization and grappling with growing demands for democratic reform, Louise's presence offered a stabilizing yet progressive influence. Her intellectual pursuits and quiet diplomacy allowed her to serve as an intermediary between conservative royal interests and the burgeoning liberal movements in Sweden. She supported artists, poets, and reformers, carving out a space in which monarchy could remain relevant to a modern and changing society. She was not a queen of spectacle but of substance, and her contributions were grounded in a sincere belief in the power of education and the dignity of service. The Coburg Heiresses also frequently found expression outside of direct political power, using cultural institutions and philanthropy as channels for influence. Princess Marie of Edinburgh, later Queen Marie of Romania, was one such visionary. Born into the British royal family and married into the Romanian monarchy, Marie redefined the role of consort with courage, charisma, and intellectual engagement. During World War I, she assumed a public and almost mythic role in Romania's national struggle. Her work with the Red Cross, her appearances at the front, and her tireless advocacy for her country at the post-war peace conferences elevated her to near sainthood in the eyes of her people. Beyond politics, she was a prolific writer, an amateur painter, and a champion of Romanian culture. She embraced the aesthetics of her adopted homeland and helped craft a new narrative of national identity that was both rooted in tradition and forward-looking. Her palace at Balchik became a gathering place for artists, thinkers, and reformers. In this space, monarchy met modernism, and Marie stood at the intersection as a facilitator of dialogue and change. These Coburg women often encountered resistance, criticism, and marginalization within their own courts. Their attempts to influence policy or culture were frequently dismissed or met with suspicion, especially when they deviated from the ornamental roles expected of royal consorts. Yet this did not deter them. Their ability to maneuver within restrictive frameworks while still leaving a lasting imprint speaks to a resilience and creativity that deserves far greater recognition. Their stories demonstrate that power is not only wielded from thrones or through decrees, but also in conversations, in public appearances, in letters, and in the subtle shaping of court life and public opinion. Empress Elizabeth of Austria, popularly known as Sisi, also intersects with the broader Coburg narrative through family ties and shared values. Though she was not born a Coburg, her marriage into the Habsburgs was part of the same dynastic strategy that defined Coburg alliances. Elizabeth became an icon of personal rebellion and cultural introspection. Renowned for her beauty and independence, she fiercely resisted the strictures of the Austrian court and became a traveler, poet, and free spirit. Her struggles with depression and loss humanized her in the eyes of her subjects, while her patronage of Hungarian nationalism added complexity to her political identity. In a world that demanded conformity and submission from royal women, Elizabeth carved a space of emotional authenticity and philosophical inquiry. Her life, filled with personal tragedy and reflective solitude, reveals another dimension of female royal experience, one that values interiority and individual expression as forms of resistance. Even the lesser-known Coburg heiresses played essential roles in shaping the institutions around them. Princess Antoinette of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, sister of King Leopold I of Belgium, used her position not only to support her brother's rule, but to promote education and charitable initiatives in the Belgian court. Her social work laid the groundwork for more systemic reforms in child welfare and women's health. Princess Charlotte of Belgium, daughter of Leopold I and wife of Emperor Maximilian I of Mexico, remains one of the most tragic and compelling figures of the 19th century. Her deep involvement in the administration of the Mexican Empire and her desperate attempts to seek European support for her husband's faltering regime testify to her intelligence and courage. After Maximilian's execution, Charlotte's descent into mental illness was seen by many as a manifestation of the intense pressure and betrayal she endured. Yet even in this tragic ending, her story evokes a haunting commentary on the emotional costs of dynastic ambition and the fragility of personal identity within the machinery of empire. The lives of these women were not monolithic. They encompassed queenship and widowhood, public triumph and private despair. They were artists and administrators, diplomats and dreamers. Each carried the expectations of her lineage while also forging her own path. Their collective narrative challenges the assumption that women in royal families were merely decorative or peripheral. Instead, it reveals how they engaged with the full complexity of their times, shaping, responding to, and often challenging the worlds in which they lived. In an age when political power was typically defined in male terms, these Coburg heiresses demonstrated that influence could be wielded in myriad ways, often in the quiet but enduring spaces between policy and persona. Their legacies continue to resonate not only in the institutions they touched, but in the evolving understanding of what it means to lead, to serve, and to belong to a tradition. In recent years, historical scholarship has begun to re-examine the contributions of royal women with greater seriousness and nuance, uncovering letters, diaries, and portraits that shed light on their interior lives and public roles. These sources offer invaluable insight into the emotional and intellectual landscapes of the Coburg heiresses. They reveal women who were deeply aware of their historical roles and who sought to navigate them with dignity, creativity, and resolve. The Coburg women, far from being mere appendages to male power, emerged as architects of cultural continuity and political transition. They bore the weight of their titles with a complex blend of grace and gravity, often mediating between tradition and change. In doing so, they expanded the possibilities for what women in positions of inherited privilege could achieve. Their stories challenge us to rethink our assumptions about history, to look beyond the crown and into the lived experiences of those who wore it. These heiresses did not simply uphold dynastic legacies, they transformed them. They serve as a reminder that history is not only made in war rooms and parliaments, but also in salons, nurseries, libraries, and quiet acts of defiance. The Coburg heiresses brought to life the idea that royalty need not be static or ceremonial, but could be dynamic, responsive, and engaged. Their diverse contributions to governance, education, the arts, diplomacy, and humanitarian work form a vibrant tapestry that continues to enrich the historical imagination. By embracing their complexity, we can better appreciate the roles they played not as footnotes to the men beside them, but as full participants in the unfolding of European history. Across the vast and intricate web of European royalty, few names resonate with the subtle yet enduring power of the House of Coburg. This illustrious lineage, anchored in the German duchy of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, extended its reach far beyond its modest geographic origins. While kings, princes, and dukes often stand as the visible symbols of dynastic success, it is within the often overlooked stories of the Coburg heiresses that one finds the more nuanced, long-lasting currents of influence. These women were more than royal brides or diplomatic tools. They were architects of alliances, curators of cultural exchanges, and agents of transformation across political, social, and intellectual domains. Through carefully orchestrated marriages and a sharp understanding of statecraft, the Coburg heiresses created a network of influence that spanned the continent and reached into global spheres. Their lives form an extraordinary testament to the enduring power of relationships, communication, and quiet diplomacy. The marriage strategy of the Coburg dynasty was no accident. It was a deliberate and calculated effort to ensure the family's influence was not limited by borders or armies. From the early 19th century, Coburg daughters and nieces were guided toward unions that would yield the greatest benefit, not only in terms of territory or titles, but in the shaping of ideologies, national identities, and intergovernmental stability. These women became queens, empresses, consorts, and mothers of future monarchs. In each new court they entered, they carried with them a set of values, connections, and cultural sensibilities that subtly but significantly affected their host nations. One of the most defining examples of this phenomenon is Queen Victoria, who by marrying her first cousin Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha embedded the Coburg line into the heart of the British Empire. Though she herself was a Hanoverian by birth, her marriage transformed the trajectory of British royalty. Through their 9 children, Victoria and Albert forged alliances with almost every major royal house in Europe. These children married into the courts of Germany, Russia, Denmark, Greece, Norway, Romania, and Spain. Each marriage was not simply a family arrangement, but a diplomatic gesture. The Coburg strategy of using matrimonial alliances as a form of international diplomacy had far-reaching consequences for European unity and conflict. Even in the lead-up to the First World War, the tangled network of blood relations among Europe's royal families, many of them Coburg descendants, complicated allegiances and stoked both expectations and tensions. Yet the power of the Coburg women went beyond whom they married. It lay in how they shaped the character and direction of their adopted countries. In each nation where a Coburg woman assumed a royal role, there was often a quiet but profound recalibration of cultural values, national narratives, and institutional frameworks. Queen Maria of Romania, granddaughter of Queen Victoria and wife of King Ferdinand I, represents a particularly vivid example of this dynamic. Though born a British princess, Marie quickly embraced her Romanian identity with fervor and imagination. She learned the language, adopted local customs, and made herself a symbol of unity in a nation undergoing seismic change. During the First World War, she emerged as a national heroine. She worked tirelessly to support Romanian soldiers, visited hospitals, and boosted public morale. After the war, she played a pivotal diplomatic role at the Paris Peace Conference, where her charm and eloquence helped secure international recognition for Romania's expanded borders. Through her charisma, empathy, and unwavering dedication, Marie elevated Romania's standing on the world stage. Cultural diplomacy was another arena in which the Coburg heiresses thrived. Whether through patronage of the arts, establishment of educational institutions, or support for scientific exploration, they left lasting imprints on the intellectual and artistic landscapes of their countries. Empress Elizabeth of Austria, known as Sisi, contributed to a growing cultural appreciation for individual freedom, travel, and poetry. Though not a Coburg by blood, she was part of the extended network through family ties and shared values. Sisi rejected the rigidity of the Austrian court and spent much of her life in motion, seeking inspiration and solace in the natural world and in the arts. Her patronage of Hungarian culture helped bring about the Austro-Hungarian Compromise of 1867 and earned her enduring affection among the Hungarian people. Her life illustrates how cultural fluency and emotional intelligence could be used as tools of influence, fostering unity in diverse empires. Princess Charlotte of Belgium, daughter of King Leopold I and wife of Emperor Maximilian I of Mexico, reveals another dimension of Coburg female influence. Her story is one of both ambition and tragedy. Sent to Mexico with her husband to establish a European-backed monarchy, Charlotte, renamed Empress Carlotta, found herself at the center of a volatile political experiment. While Maximilian struggled to gain legitimacy, Charlotte took on the heavy mantle of diplomacy, lobbying European leaders for support and trying to hold the empire together as it crumbled around her. Her eventual descent into mental illness after her husband's execution was a heartbreaking end to a once vibrant vision. Yet her efforts illustrate the high stakes and profound pressures that came with such roles. These women were not passive participants in the machinations of power. They were, at times, the glue holding fragile political arrangements together. Art and education were also common threads in the legacies of Coburg heiresses. Queen Victoria's interest in the arts was mirrored in the construction of institutions that promoted design, architecture, and public exhibitions. With Prince Albert, she helped establish the South Kensington complex that would become home to the Victoria and Albert Museum, the Natural History Museum, and the Royal Albert Hall. These institutions represented more than royal indulgence. They were part of a broader mission to elevate public taste, foster learning, and connect the monarchy with the intellectual currents of the time. The Coburg vision of monarchy was not limited to gilded rooms and state processions. It extended into schools, theaters, lecture halls, and hospitals. Philanthropy, especially in the realm of healthcare, became a major area of focus for these royal women. In Germany, Princess Augusta of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, mother of Queen Victoria, helped support maternity clinics and orphanages. Across the continent, Coburg descendants initiated or supported the construction of hospitals, schools, and housing for the poor. They often did so not only out of religious obligation or social expectation, but from a sincere belief in service. These initiatives were frequently tied to movements for modernization and public welfare, showing a progressive spirit that challenged the stereotype of detached royalty. In Sweden, Queen Louise used her position to champion causes related to women's health and child welfare. Her philanthropic legacy included support for medical training and educational reform, often in partnership with civil society and church organizations. These actions helped build social trust and contributed to the soft power of monarchies that were increasingly being scrutinized in democratic societies. The Coburg influence also extended into the world of fashion and etiquette, where the image of royalty became a tool of communication and cohesion. Dress, language, gesture, and ritual were carefully curated by these women to convey messages of stability, continuity, and sophistication. Empress Maria Feodorovna of Russia, originally Dagmar of Denmark and mother of Tsar Nicholas II, was admired for her grace and style, which helped soften the harsh image of autocracy. Her presence at public events, often accompanied by quiet acts of kindness or symbolic gestures, maintained a vital connection between the Romanov dynasty and the Russian people. Through her court, she promoted traditional Russian art and Orthodox values while maintaining a cosmopolitan openness inherited from her European upbringing. Her balancing of national identity and international heritage exemplified the skillful diplomacy these women practiced daily. Beyond Europe, the Coburg network found echoes in global narratives. Through colonial links, international travel, and global philanthropy, their reach touched India, Africa, and the Americas. Queen Victoria's status as Empress of India added another layer to her legacy. Though she never visited the subcontinent, her interest in Indian culture was not superficial. She studied the language, maintained close relationships with Indian attendants such as Abdul Karim, and used these ties to shape a narrative of inclusive empire. Her personal efforts, however modest, symbolized a broader trend within the Coburg lineage to engage with the world beyond Europe, not just through conquest or control, but through curiosity and exchange. This spirit of connection is perhaps what best defines the Coburg heiresses. They connected people, ideas, and traditions across vast divides. Whether through marriage, mentorship, patronage, or friendship, they acted as bridges between cultures and eras. Their ability to adapt, to speak multiple languages, to understand differing customs, to empathize across class and national lines, made them invaluable in a world often shaped by misunderstanding and conflict. Their stories remind us that diplomacy is not only conducted through treaties and speeches, but also in the warmth of a greeting, the elegance of a dinner, or the quiet power of presence. Even as the 20th century brought the decline of many monarchies, the legacy of these women persisted. Their descendants, many of whom still occupy ceremonial or constitutional roles today, continue to draw on the foundations laid by these Coburg foremothers. The values they promoted, education, cultural exchange, philanthropy, and thoughtful engagement, have become essential elements of modern monarchy. They help transition the image of royalty from authoritarian rulers to public servants and cultural ambassadors. In this way, their influence can be felt not only in history books, but in the continuing evolution of leadership in the modern world. The Coburg heiresses, through their intelligence, empathy, and determination, transcended the limitations of their time. They demonstrated that influence need not come from force or decree, but can emerge from relationships, creativity, and service. They left behind more than castles and titles. They left institutions, ideals, and stories that continue to inspire. Their network of influence, built not only through bloodlines, but through shared values and commitments, remains a model of what thoughtful leadership can achieve. In revisiting their lives, one sees a pattern not of dominance but of dialogue. They brought European courts into conversation with each other, introduced new ideas into old institutions, and carried forward traditions that spoke to both the past and the future. Their impact on art, education, diplomacy, and philanthropy shows how the soft powers of influence, often wielded quietly and subtly, can shape the world just as profoundly as any battle or law. Their example offers a timeless lesson in how grace, resilience, and vision can move the arc of history. The Coburg Heiresses, through a blend of familial strategy and personal resolve, wove a fabric of connection across nations and generations. In a world that often sought to define them by marriage contracts or ceremonial roles, they emerged as complex figures of agency and transformation. Their legacy, rooted in diplomacy and human connection, is a testament to the enduring power of influence when wielded with purpose and heart. Through their actions and ideals, they have inscribed themselves into the deeper narrative of global history, not only as queens and empresses, but as visionaries whose influence continues to echo across borders and through time. Throughout history, the voices of powerful women have often been lost, their stories softened, reshaped, or entirely erased to fit narratives designed by patriarchal systems. The accounts of queens, empresses, princesses, and noble women, particularly those connected to the Coburg dynasty, have frequently been filtered through the perspectives of men who documented history, leaving behind only fragments of their truth. These women, bound by the roles society imposed upon them, nevertheless exercised influence, made strategic decisions, and transformed the worlds they inhabited. Yet, their significance has been consistently minimized, dismissed as secondary to the actions of kings and emperors, or buried beneath the ceremonial trappings of royalty. As we explore their stories with clearer eyes, we begin to understand the magnitude of their contributions and the injustice of their historical marginalization. The women of the Coburg lineage lived lives intricately entwined with the fate of nations. Through political marriages, they were placed on distant thrones and expected to embody the values of both their birth and adopted cultures. The prevailing historical narrative often casts them as pawns in dynastic games, passive recipients of fate rather than active shapers of it. This portrayal has done a disservice not only to their memory, but to the broader understanding of female agency in history. By challenging these narratives, we unearth the layered complexities of women who navigated royal courts, international diplomacy, personal loss, public scrutiny, and institutional limitations with resilience and vision. Female agency, particularly in royal contexts, does not always look like overt power or command. It often manifests in influence, subtle, persistent, and deeply strategic. Women like Queen Victoria, who ruled over an empire, yet is often remembered primarily for her domestic life and mourning attire, used their positions to effect substantial change. Victoria was not merely a figurehead. She wielded considerable political power during key moments in her reign. Her correspondence with prime ministers, her strategic decisions in marriage alliances for her children, and her efforts to shape the image of monarchy itself show a ruler fully aware of her capabilities. Yet much of her political intelligence has been downplayed in historical accounts, which tend to focus more on her emotional states and familial roles. This pattern of minimization is not unique to Victoria. Consider Empress Carlotta of Mexico, born Princess Charlotte of Belgium. Her tragic end is often emphasized in historical retellings, a descent into mental illness after the execution of her husband, Emperor Maximilian I. But less frequently acknowledged is the determination with which she tried to hold the Mexican Empire together. When Maximilian faced mounting political opposition, Carlotta traveled to Europe alone to plead with Napoleon III and the Pope for support. She wrote letters, met with leaders, and acted as the empire's chief diplomat in its final days. Her failure does not negate her agency. Rather, it highlights the immense obstacles she faced as a woman operating within and pushing against a patriarchal international order. The language used to describe these women has also contributed to their erasure. Terms like consort, wife, or mother imply roles of support rather than leadership. Their public contributions were often relegated to footnotes, while their personal lives were subjected to intense scrutiny. When a royal woman did act boldly, she was labeled ambitious or unstable. If she was successful, her achievements were attributed to the men around her. If she failed, the failure was seen as a confirmation of female inadequacy. In this way, the historical lens has both distorted and diminished the impact of powerful women. The Coburg women also suffered from the idealization of femininity, which demanded that royal women be graceful, submissive, beautiful, and quiet. Those who defied these expectations were either rewritten to fit the mold or remembered with a hint of scandal. Queen Maria of Romania, for instance, was known for her charisma, intelligence, and political savvy. She served as a diplomat during and after World War I, representing her country on the international stage. She understood the importance of image, employing fashion and presence as tools of persuasion. Yet even her legacy was shaped more by romantic speculation and aesthetic appreciation than a true acknowledgement of her diplomatic achievements. The structure of historical documentation itself has favored male perspectives. Court records, official biographies, political treaties, and newspapers were authored predominantly by men. Women's correspondence, diaries, and personal writings, when preserved, were often dismissed as emotional or domestic rather than political or intellectual. This has created an imbalance in the sources historians rely upon, resulting in a skewed understanding of the past. It also means that reclaiming these women's stories requires not just revisiting old texts, but reinterpreting them, asking new questions, and recognizing the biases that shaped their construction. Another reason the stories of these women were minimized lies in the fragile legitimacy of monarchy itself. Royal power, especially in constitutional systems, required careful presentation. A queen who was too assertive could be perceived as a threat to the order of succession or the balance of governance. As a result, many royal families preferred to project images of harmonious, controlled domesticity. This public image often masked the real contributions women were making behind the scenes. In private, they might be advising kings, managing estates, negotiating alliances, or intervening in policy discussions. These invisible forms of power are harder to trace, but no less important. The idea of female agency within a patriarchal structure also involves acknowledging the limitations imposed on these women. They were not free to pursue any path they wished. Their power was always conditional, dependent on birth, marriage, popularity, and political context. Yet within those constraints, they carved out space for themselves. They built alliances, cultivated public support, supported reforms, and influenced the direction of their nations. Understanding agency in this context requires looking at not only what they did, but how they navigated a world that often tried to silence them. These stories resonate deeply with contemporary audiences because they reflect ongoing struggles for recognition, equality, and autonomy. The challenges faced by the Coburg women, being underestimated, judged for their appearance, forced to balance personal desires with public duty, mirror those experienced by many women today. Their triumphs, when they occurred, were hard-won and often misunderstood. But they remind us that progress is possible, that even within rigid systems, change can be initiated, and that the voices of women, though sometimes quiet, can carry across centuries. In a world that increasingly values inclusivity and historical accuracy, revisiting these narratives becomes an act of justice. It allows us to honor the contributions of those who came before and to draw strength from their resilience. By uncovering their stories, we not only enrich our understanding of the past, but empower new generations to recognize the diverse forms that leadership and courage can take. The enduring relevance of these women's stories also lies in their complexity. They were not perfect. They made mistakes, faced defeats, and sometimes reinforced the very systems that oppressed them. But their humanity makes them powerful symbols. Their lives offer lessons in diplomacy, empathy, resilience, and strategic thinking. They remind us that agency is not the absence of limitation, but the ability to act meaningfully within those limitations. Queen Victoria's insistence on the moral authority of monarchy, Queen Marie's diplomatic brilliance, Empress Carlotta's courageous defiance, and countless others like Queen Louise of Sweden or Queen Alexandra of the United Kingdom, all demonstrate the multifaceted ways in which royal women shaped their times. They were educators, reformers, artists, and activists. They used soft power long before the term was coined, understanding that influence could flow through culture, conversation, and example as much as through law or decree. Reclaiming their place in history challenges the very foundations of historical writing. It forces us to ask who writes history, whose voices are valued, and how narratives are constructed. It invites a more holistic understanding of power, one that includes not only rulers and generals but also caregivers, communicators, and cultural icons. It encourages us to look beyond traditional metrics of success and to appreciate the quieter forms of resistance and leadership that have always been part of human history. This reevaluation of the past also creates space for new forms of storytelling. Literature, film, and scholarship are beginning to reflect more nuanced portraits of royal women, bringing their full humanity into focus. These portrayals help dispel the myths of passivity and fragility that have long defined women in power. They show us women who were strategic, passionate, flawed, and deeply committed to their roles. They allow audiences today to see themselves in these historical figures, not as distant monarchs, but as relatable human beings navigating complicated lives. The relevance of these stories also lies in the inspiration they provide. In a time when women are still fighting for equal representation in politics, leadership, and media, the Coburg women offer a legacy of strength and strategy. Their lives demonstrate that even in the most patriarchal settings, women can find ways to lead, influence, and change the world around them. They remind us that history is not static, but a living dialogue between past and present. As society continues to confront issues of gender inequality, systemic bias, and historical omission, the act of recovering these forgotten stories becomes more than an academic exercise. It becomes a call to reimagine what history can be, a space where all voices are heard, where complexity is embraced, and where the contributions of women are given their due. It is in this reimagining that we find hope, guidance, and a deeper understanding of our collective past. The Coburg women, with their intelligence, creativity, and resilience, belong not to the margins of history, but to its very heart. Their stories, once obscured, now shine with renewed clarity, offering insight into the enduring power of agency, the challenge of navigating patriarchal systems, and the possibility of transformation. They are not relics of a bygone era, but vital threads in the fabric of human experience, reminding us that the struggle for recognition and the exercise of influence are timeless endeavors. As we continue to uncover their truths, we honor not only their memory, but also the countless others whose voices are still waiting to be heard. The legacy of the Coburg Heiresses is one that continues to echo through time, resonating deeply in the spheres of art, culture, politics, and social evolution well into the 21st century. Though they lived in eras shaped by rigid traditions and entrenched hierarchies, their lives were anything but static. These women navigated the complexities of dynastic expectations and patriarchal constraints with extraordinary acumen, leaving behind enduring legacies that continue to shape contemporary society. Their influence was neither fleeting nor confined to the courts they inhabited. Instead, it unfolded over generations, subtly shifting the contours of historical progress and challenging the simplistic narratives that so often dominate the study of royalty and power. Far from being mere figureheads or passive participants in the dynastic games of Europe, the Coburg heiresses actively influenced the political and cultural tapestry of their time. Through marriages that linked royal houses from Britain to Russia, from Romania to Portugal, they became diplomatic conduits and cultural ambassadors, infusing their host nations with ideas, customs, and sensibilities that often had long-lasting effects. They were patrons of the arts, supporters of educational reform, founders of hospitals, and sometimes even quiet architects of state policy. While much attention has historically been given to kings, emperors, and male statesmen, the women of Coburg were often working behind the scenes, their hands guiding history in ways both visible and veiled. The power of their legacy lies not only in the visible monuments or formal institutions that remain, but also in the social values and cultural shifts they helped bring about. Queen Victoria, arguably the most well-known Coburg heiress, helped redefine the concept of monarchy itself. Her reign, which coincided with a period of dramatic industrial and social change, transformed the British monarchy into a more symbolic and moral institution, forging a new relationship between sovereign and subject. Her descendants would populate nearly every royal court in Europe, but her influence extended beyond genealogy. Her personal image, meticulously curated and deployed, became a tool of statecraft. In her widowhood, she cultivated a powerful public narrative of virtue, restraint, and maternal sovereignty that shaped the expectations placed on monarchs for decades to come. Queen Maria of Romania carried forward this tradition of influence, not by bloodline alone but by character and conviction. During and after the First World War, she was a tireless advocate for her country on the international stage. She used her charm, intellect, and resilience to win the hearts of foreign leaders and secure the territorial interests of Romania at the Paris Peace Conference. She also wrote extensively, her memoirs and essays providing valuable insights into the psychological pressures and moral dilemmas faced by women in power. Her legacy is not simply that of a royal consort, but of a cultural and diplomatic force who stood firm in a world teetering between old empires and emerging modern states. Art and culture owe much to the Coburg women, many of whom were passionate about music, painting, literature, and architecture. Their patronage helped support artists and intellectuals, foster institutions of learning, and create public spaces that enriched the lives of those far beyond the aristocracy. Queen Elizabeth of Romania, writing under the pen name Carmen Silva, published poetry, novels, and plays that explored themes of national identity, female agency, and existential longing. Her work served not only as a reflection of her inner world, but also as a bridge between the elite and the everyday citizen, revealing how deeply she identified with the struggles and aspirations of her people. The stories of these heiresses challenge conventional historical narratives that often treat women in royalty as ornamental or incidental. Their actions tell a different story, one of agency, ambition, and profound societal influence. For too long, history has been written with a narrow lens, one that prioritizes military conquests and political treaties over personal narratives and cultural contributions. The Coburg heiresses demand a broader view, one that recognizes the interplay between public and private, between influence and power, and between personal conviction and political strategy. Their lives also highlight the evolving nature of womanhood itself. In times when women's rights were barely acknowledged in public discourse, these royal women managed to carve out roles for themselves that transcended the domestic sphere. They were public figures in an age when women were expected to be silent, mediators in times of political tension, and visionaries who helped modernize their societies. Their ability to navigate such contradictory expectations, remaining within the bounds of societal decorum while subtly subverting those very constraints, demonstrates a form of leadership that was both courageous and revolutionary. The endurance of their legacy is also evident in the institutions they helped found and the values they championed. Many of these women were instrumental in advancing causes related to public health, women's education, and the welfare of children. Queen Victoria supported numerous charitable initiatives and helped promote the idea that monarchy should be a moral force within society. Queen Marie and Queen Elizabeth promoted nursing and literacy, emphasizing the need for empathy and intellectual engagement in national life. These were not mere acts of charity, they were conscious efforts to reshape the role of royalty into something more humane, compassionate, and forward-thinking. In an age increasingly focused on equity, inclusion, and the re-evaluation of historical narratives, the lives of these women offer powerful models for rethinking leadership and influence. Their legacies ask us to reconsider what constitutes historical significance and to broaden our understanding of who shapes history. It is not only the men who lead armies or sign treaties, but also the women who build institutions, negotiate peace, inspire art, and speak truth to power in their own quiet, determined ways. Revisiting the stories of the Coburg heiresses with fresh eyes allows us to engage in a richer, more inclusive dialogue with the past. It encourages us to question the frameworks that have defined historical importance for centuries and to recognize that impact is not always loud or immediate. Sometimes, it takes generations for the contributions of certain individuals, particularly women, to be fully acknowledged. The legacy of these heiresses reminds us that time has a way of vindicating those whose influence was once overlooked. Their stories continue to inspire not because they were flawless, but because they were complex, resilient, and human. They experienced love and loss, duty and rebellion, joy and profound isolation. They moved through courts, war rooms, and salons, learning to read the signs of their time and to use what tools were available to them. In doing so, they left behind a map, not always easy to follow, but rich with lessons about perseverance, diplomacy, and the enduring power of conviction. In our current moment, as we seek to build a world that honors truth and equity, their stories feel especially relevant. They remind us that every voice matters, even those once relegated to the margins. They urge us to look deeper, to listen more carefully, and to recognize the threads of influence that women have woven throughout history. The Coburg heiresses may have lived in gilded palaces and walked through the halls of power, but their legacy extends far beyond those walls. It lives in the values they upheld, the reforms they advanced, and the imagination they inspired. As we reflect on their contributions, it becomes increasingly clear that history is not solely about conquests, governance, or dominance. It is also about empathy, resilience, vision, and the courage to act in the face of opposition. The stories of these women expand the definition of leadership and invite us to embrace a more holistic view of historical progress, one that values not only the victories of war, but the triumphs of culture, education, and moral strength. In a world where historical revision is both necessary and empowering, the Coburg Heiresses offer a profound example of how influence transcends traditional structures of power. They remind us that the shaping of nations and societies often happens not only in the grand decisions of kings, but in the quiet, consistent actions of those who understand that true leadership is rooted in service, wisdom, and unwavering determination. Their enduring impact also serves as a call to action. It challenges educators, scholars, and storytellers to seek out and amplify voices that have been forgotten or ignored. It invites readers and learners to question inherited narratives and to explore the fuller, richer stories that lie beneath the surface. Most of all, it affirms the idea that history is not a static record, but a living conversation, one in which we all have a role to play. The Coburg Heiresses have left us more than titles and portraits. They have left us a legacy of hope, of complexity, and of courage. Their lives continue to speak to us because they represent the possibility of change, even within the most rigid structures. They show us that influence does not require a throne, only a voice willing to speak, a mind willing to act, and a heart committed to the greater good. As we look to the future, may we carry their lessons with us, not as relics of a bygone era, but as guiding lights in our continued pursuit of justice, equity, and understanding. Let us remember that history belongs to all of us, and that its true power lies in the stories we choose to tell, the truths we choose to honor, and the legacies we choose to uphold.